Picture a row of stone seats side by side, no walls between them, in a busy public building where Romans casually sat and chatted while relieving themselves in full view of complete strangers. This wasn't some rare exception. It was the standard, ordinary Roman approach to public sanitation, and understanding it reveals a genuinely fascinating window into ancient daily life and engineering. Roman public latrines, called foracae, were a common civic feature in cities across the empire, and archaeological remains, remarkably well preserved at sites like Ostia and various locations throughout Roman Britain, show a design that looks genuinely startling to modern eyes. Long stone benches with evenly spaced keyhole-shaped openings ran continuously around the walls of a single shared room, with absolutely no dividers or partitions separating individual users from one another whatsoever. Users sat directly next to each other, often facing each other across the room, without any expectation of the kind of individual privacy modern bathroom design takes almost completely for granted today. This design wasn't primarily about wealth or genuine engineering limitation. It reflected a fundamentally different, well-documented Roman cultural attitude toward the body and physical privacy more broadly. Roman bathing culture, centered on large, genuinely elaborate public bathhouses, similarly involved communal, largely unclothed bathing among fairly large groups of people at once. Historians studying Roman social customs generally note that ancient Roman concepts of physical privacy differed substantially from many later modern Western cultural norms, with public communal activities, including using the latrine, functioning as genuinely normal, unremarkable social occasions rather than as activities requiring careful individual seclusion. The actual underlying engineering supporting these public latrines was genuinely impressive for its specific era, deserving real credit independent of the fairly startling social arrangement itself. A continuously flowing channel of water ran beneath the stone seating, carrying waste away efficiently toward the city's broader sewer system. Many Roman cities, including Rome itself, maintained sophisticated integrated sewer networks, most famously the Cloaca Maxima, one of the world's earliest large-scale sewage systems, originally constructed considerably earlier for drainage purposes, and later substantially expanded and adapted to also handle sewage from public latrines and private residences alike. Water supply for this entire flushing system came from Rome's extensive, genuinely remarkable aqueduct network, which delivered fresh water into the city on a truly massive scale, supporting public baths, private residential households, ornamental public fountains, and public latrines simultaneously. This required careful civil engineering planning to reliably maintain consistent water flow, specifically through the latrine channels, ensuring waste was actually carried away efficiently rather than simply accumulating and creating serious, obvious sanitation problems for the surrounding neighborhood. Personal hygiene practices at these Roman public latrines involved a specific communal tool that frequently surprises and fascinates modern audiences learning about it for the first time: the tersorium, a natural sea sponge attached securely to a wooden stick or handle. This particular tool was used for personal cleaning after using the latrine, and, based on the best available archaeological and historical evidence, was frequently shared among multiple different users, sometimes rinsed in a small flowing channel of water positioned directly in front of the stone seating, or occasionally kept soaking in a shared container of water or diluted vinegar solution between individual uses. This particular shared sponge practice, understandably, raises genuinely serious hygiene and disease transmission concerns from any modern medical perspective, and it's worth being direct and honest about this specific point rather than romanticizing the practice. Modern medical historians studying ancient sanitation practices have noted that this kind of shared personal hygiene tool likely contributed meaningfully to the spread of various intestinal parasites and other communicable diseases within Roman urban populations, since there was, of course, no meaningful contemporary understanding of germ theory or bacterial transmission to inform safer alternative practices at the time. Private toilets did also exist within wealthier individual Roman households, offering somewhat more genuine personal privacy than the public latrines, though these were still typically fairly simple in their overall design by comparison to fully modern plumbing standards. Wealthier homes might feature a private latrine connected either directly to the city's broader sewer system when a specific residence was fortunate enough to be located near one, or alternatively to a simple cesspit requiring periodic manual emptying by dedicated household staff or hired outside labor. Public latrines actually served a genuinely significant, if somewhat unexpected, additional economic function within the broader Roman world, one worth mentioning directly here as a genuinely interesting historical detail. Urine collected from Roman public latrines was actually gathered and sold commercially, since it contained ammonia, a genuinely useful chemical compound at the time for various practical industrial purposes, including cleaning and treating woven wool textiles, and even, according to some ancient historical accounts, for whitening teeth. The Roman Emperor Vespasian reportedly imposed a specific formal tax on this particular urine collection trade, giving rise to the enduring Latin phrase pecunia non olet, meaning money doesn't smell. Still occasionally used today in reference to earning income from a source some people might otherwise consider somewhat distasteful or unsavory. Roman latrine culture also carried genuine social and even political significance beyond simple basic sanitation function alone. These particular public spaces functioned as informal, everyday gathering and conversation spots. Not entirely unlike how modern coffee shops or casual water cooler conversations at work sometimes serve today. Some surviving ancient graffiti recovered directly from actual Roman latrine walls includes casual jokes, political commentary, and various personal messages, offering modern historians a genuinely fascinating, refreshingly unfiltered window into ordinary, everyday Roman social life and popular attitudes, quite distinct from the more formal, carefully composed official writings that dominate most surviving Roman historical texts. Regional variation in latrine design also existed across the wider Roman world, worth mentioning briefly here, reflecting local climate conditions, available construction materials, and specific local engineering constraints. Latrines in Roman military forts along the empire's various frontiers, including well-preserved examples found at housesteads along Hadrian's Wall in northern Britain, show design adaptations specifically suited to a considerably colder climate and to the particular practical needs of a large, concentrated garrison population. These military latrines needed to efficiently handle waste from potentially hundreds of soldiers simultaneously, requiring especially robust and reliable water channel engineering to function properly and hygienically at that considerably larger operational scale. Archaeologists studying Roman latrine remains have also found genuinely interesting evidence regarding actual seating capacity and typical daily usage patterns at these sites. Some of the larger surviving public latrines could reportedly accommodate 20 or more people seated simultaneously, suggesting these specific facilities were built and engineered to handle substantial daily foot traffic in busy, heavily populated urban areas. The specific placement of these public latrines, frequently located near bustling public markets, busy bathhouses, and other high-traffic civic gathering areas, further indicates they were thoughtfully integrated as a genuinely normal, expected part of ordinary daily urban life and movement throughout a typical Roman city. Roman legal and civic administration also treated public sanitation infrastructure as a genuinely serious matter of formal governance, not merely an incidental practical convenience left to chance. Dedicated municipal officials called aediles held direct responsibility for overseeing public facilities, including latrines, baths, and the broader street and sewer system, ensuring these facilities stayed reasonably functional and were kept adequately maintained. This kind of formal administrative oversight reflects a genuinely sophisticated Roman civic mindset, one that treated shared public infrastructure as a serious governmental responsibility deserving dedicated resources and specifically assigned oversight, rather than as an unregulated matter left entirely to individual initiative or informal private arrangement. The specific decline of this sophisticated Roman sanitation infrastructure following the fall of the Western Roman Empire represents a genuinely striking historical example of meaningful technological and public health regression rather than steady, continuous forward progress. Many European cities, in the centuries that followed Rome's collapse, actually experienced measurably worse public sanitation than they had previously enjoyed under organized, centralized Roman administration, and comparably sophisticated large-scale urban sewage systems didn't reliably reappear again